Hello friends, this is Brent, healer, coach, intuitive, and the title of this video is No Self-Realization. So if you've been following along with some of my videos so far, or if you're feeling particularly optimistic that this one will be good, please hit the like button and please do subscribe. Furthermore, if you have been following some of my stuff and you're interested in meeting one-on-one and you're interested in the one-on-one work that I offer, there's a link for that below as well for you to check out where I tell you all about that. Let us dive in. So my personal practice has taken me to a deeper level of awakening than I've ever experienced before. And it's a layer of awakening that we can call no self-realization. It's something that I've been sort of reading about and sort of halfway interested in, but in the last few months, it's become very important for me to step into this. Just in general, over the last few months, there's been a huge uptick in my desire to awaken, to move into enlightenment, to move into the end of suffering. And that is what I've been doing. That has been a big front and center focus for me. So I want to detail to you this layer of realization and describe it as articulately as I can. The only challenge that I anticipate is that this is just a new layer, and so therefore it needs new language, and I'm not as adept at speaking about it as I am about different other subjects that I talked about with you here. So nevertheless, I want to go for it. I want to do my very best, and I want to see if I can transmit it to you. As always, it bears mentioning in every video, listen with your mind, but also listen with your body. And what we're going to want to pay attention to is what your mind has to say about the following few words, and also what your body has to say about it. Because what you may notice for a lot of you is that your mind will want to reject it because we'll be going inscrutably in the direction of the loss of control, the giving up of control, the giving up of understanding, the giving up of having something to know and hold on to and grip and control and make permanent and make real, this kind of thing. But if your body responds positively to it in the form of relief, in the form of lightness, in the form of humor, in the form of I really like this, then that would probably signal that you're being told something that is nourishing for you, something that will allow you to expand. It's been such a cool insight. It's been such a cool thing to observe how our minds hold belief systems that prevent us from expanding, that prevent us from awakening, that prevent us from healing. Why would our minds do that? Well, because the mind doesn't want anything new, just in general, just across the board. The mind doesn't want anything new because anything that is new is unknown, and anything that's unknown is a threat. And so that's just how it perceives the world. So it takes quite a lot of courage to look at the self-protective mechanism of the mind and just give it permission to relax so that you can explore some new territory that could be quite good for you. I want to say also that this material that I'm going to get into came as a result of me channeling my higher self. So in the last video that I put, I offered a big discussion on validity and mysticism. And in it, I was more or less describing my journey with mysticism, my comfort with different mystical realms and ideas and insights and perceptions, but feeling uncomfortable with it because of my intense desire not to take in anything that's untrue, take in anything that's false, or say something that's untrue, or say something that's false. And through making a pretty profound leap into trust, into the trust of myself, the trust of my perceptions, the trust of how the world appears to me, I've been able to move more deeply into these realms and explore them more, and to be able to communicate with my higher self, to communicate with my guides with higher levels of fidelity, which has been very rewarding. So what I'm about to share with you is what I had channeled from my higher self into my personal world with great, great benefit. So let that be a testament as well to the success of trusting one's self. So the concept of no self can be pretty easily summarized with the following question that I believe is a very front and center question in the practice of Zen, the tradition of Zen. The question being, who am I? And so it's an exercise that you can take yourself through, and it goes like this. It's like, imagine you were to ask yourself, who am I? And imagine you were to answer the question, who am I or what am I? And so just allow the answer to come up. And let's just say you answer like, oh, I'm George, or oh, I'm a man, or I'm this, I am a soul, I am consciousness, I am, a Canadian or American or, whatever it is. I'm a physical body. So anything that you would put in that blank space of here's what I am. What you may also notice is that as soon as you do that, then there's a duality that is generated in that answer where you're looking at the thing that you say that you are. Let's just say I am this body. So it's like, okay, I am this body, but then how do you explain that what I'm looking at is an object? What I'm looking at is this body. What I'm claiming myself to be is this thing that I over here am saying that I am. So there's not one thing, there's two things. There is an I that is saying that it is this thing that it thinks it is. So therefore, I can't be that because I am I. I am I, and this is it. This is this, and these are two distinct things. So then we have to dig for another answer. What am I? But then you run into the same issue. And so you can run this question by yourself. If you do it sincerely, if you really set some time aside to really dig into this question, it's amazing. What you realize is you're none of these things that you think you are, but by making this conscious to yourself, you realize that you had identified with something that you are not actually. You identified with this thing that you're not. You have confused yourself to be this thing that you think you are, when in reality, that thing is just an object. That thing could come and go, and you would still be what you are. Which is pretty interesting. And so this was a little while ago, but I was playing with this question as well. And so I went really far with it. I went as far as I could with this question. And I found at the very bottom that there's nothing really that I am. I'm just this awareness. I'm just this consciousness that is here looking around and seeing things and perceiving and just being conscious in the world. And so that was good enough for me. But then there was a final leap that I did not make until just recently. And this final leap is one that I've been listening to Suzanne Chang speak about. And also was brought up when Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about the 5 aggregates of Buddhism. So I'm gonna lay those out for you, and I'm gonna finally take you into the insight itself. So according to Buddhism, which I do not know very much about, just very broad strokes about Buddhism, but there is they have the 5 aggregates, or the 5 heaps of what a person is. So if you were to say in Buddhism what a person is, it's these 5 things. It is the form, so it's the body, the physicality, number 1. Number 2, the sensations or feelings. Number 3 is the perceptions, the things that you take in. Number 4 is the mental activity, your thoughts and your beliefs and your thought structures. And then finally, number 5 is the vijnana, which it says here is discernment, but I've also seen to indicate consciousness. And so here's the point, here's the thing that I'm saying, we can now arrive at it. You, in terms of what you are these 5 things, but you are nothing else besides these things. Body, perception, thoughts, feelings, discernment, consciousness, these are all things that come together to make you, but there's no you besides these things. In other words, there's no ghost in the machine. There's no personality underneath this. There's no person. There's no self. There's no self that has any real tangible existence. And so I would invite you to, again, we're not here to argue, but just to notice what happens as we play with and open up and internalize this idea. Even if we're going to drop the idea by the end of the video, to really enter into this territory now, because it's very, very valuable. So speaking to you now, what I notice is that there is Brent, there is a body sitting in a chair, there is a history and a future, there is information and data about this person, preferences and dislikes, hopes and dreams, fears, information. And there is also consciousness. And for most people, consciousness believes that it is a person. Consider that for yourself. Consciousness believes that it is you. Consciousness is hypnotized by the story of you. And it's so hypnotized that it no longer distinguishes itself from you. It just thinks it's you. Notice this really interesting way of considering consciousness. Consciousness as a public domain, as a public good. Consciousness, if there were any definition of what God is, if there were any definition of God that were worth its salt, we would call it consciousness. The consciousness. The one consciousness. Which shoots off little forms everywhere in the form of you and me. But your consciousness, my consciousness are just fragments or extensions of the one consciousness that is everywhere and anywhen, everywhere, always and forever. And so for a minute, we make a distinction between consciousness and form, where consciousness is empty and invulnerable and omnipresent, and form is what appears on the surface of the ocean. Form is what is happening in the physical realm. And there are just, in form, you have numberless bodies and personalities that just come in and out of existence, none of which have ultimate significance, ultimate importance. It's not terribly significant when one is born. It's not terribly significant when one dies. The existence of any form is not terribly significant. It only becomes significant when consciousness attaches itself and identifies with a form and says, I am this form. Once it does that, because consciousness is infinite and invulnerable, and because a form is finite and vulnerable, and consciousness becomes so deeply hypnotized that it believes that it's this thing, then it forgets its immortality, it forgets its invulnerability, and becomes so wrapped up in what it's observing that it now actually believes that it can die. It actually now believes it's vulnerable. And when there's fear, it is convinced by the fear. And then that it allows the fear to take over how it operates in the world. And so now it's focusing more on security. and looking out for threats and anxiety and depression and comparing itself to everybody else, trying to get ahead, trying not to fall behind, believing that it is a story of incompleteness, trying to move to completion, feeling deeply threatened that if it dies before becoming complete, then something eternally terrible will happen. It bears mentioning at this point that the whole, I'm speaking here to those of us in the Western, Americas and Europe, Christian nations, so to speak. Our ancestors were brought up on the idea of heaven and hell. The absolute necessity of getting into heaven and the absolute necessity of not going into hell. Like, remember, our grandparents and their grandparents, all of us, were terrified by this idea of heaven and hell. It runs very, very, very deep in our culture, in our ancestry, across the board. And if I'm speaking to you, it's unlikely that you are terribly threatened by the idea of heaven and hell. You were probably born into it, but then you've moved beyond it, which is wonderful. But that same thing is at play when it comes to having a story about ourselves of incompleteness. Even when we discuss the actualization of your potential, and there's this fear of completing your life and not having become the best you could have been, not having actualized your potential, not having lived your dreams. And there's this existential fear around dying without that happening. It's still a version of heaven and hell thinking that consciousness is deeply wrapped up in. As kids, we know what it's like to watch a movie and to be so compelled by the movie that when the scary bits come, like, we're actually scared because we stop discerning between the film and reality. Like, we just get pulled all the way into it. As adults, we kind of miss that. We kind of wish we could get pulled all the way into films, but we can't. But that's what's happening here. So again, I want to really just float this idea. It's so cool and weird, but to float this idea that the story of you being George, whoever you are, right? Imagine just saying to yourself, it's just a personality. It's just a life. It's just a situation. It's just a series of circumstances. It's just a story. That consciousness is hypnotized by. That consciousness has identified with. Now, if it feels scary to think about this, that would make sense. Or if you feel like, maybe you feel bored or anxious or jittery, or maybe you feel like you want, you may feel like you want to reject this in some way for whatever reason. Maybe you don't, but maybe you do. To whatever extent you feel like you want to reject this, remember that the fear mind, the ego mind, has a vested interest in maintaining the hypnosis, maintaining the identification. And why would it do that? Well, because if you think that you are this thing, then that's existential. You believe you're this thing. So to not believe you're this thing, to withdraw your identification from something, is to die in that way. To die in as much as you think you're something. If you're going to stop thinking you're this thing, that's a form of death. My intuition is that that's all that death is. Even what we consider to be the physical death. It's just it's not like the end of something. It's just the uncoupling of something from the physical body. Remembering what you are outside of that. Forever. Consciousness takes on a form. Identifies with the form. And to a certain extent, if you wish, if you're alive, it is necessary to have a form. You can't not have a form. And if you have a form, you do have to be identified with it. You have to maintain it. You have to keep it alive. You have to keep it well, keep it safe, keep it cared for in order to function into the world. Well, but that's not the issue here, right? It's possible to know that your body, your personhood, is just a token on the Monopoly board of a game that you're playing. And you can still play the game, and you should still play the game. But the difference is knowing that you're not this thing means that all of this is no longer life or death. It's just play, which is what it always should have been before things got really, really serious. An affirmation that you can say in order to activate this a little bit more is, none of this is what I am. I love saying this one. None of this is what I am. And then just look at all this stuff that's troubling you out in the world and just say, none of this is what I am. None of this is what I am. Notice the sense of silence that is created when we have a discussion like this. Aside from the yard work you can hear outside my window. Notice the silence. And notice the safety that's sort of implicit in the silence. The mind, if it's in a constant state of stimulation, it wants to remain stimulated, right? So a mind will always say like, more, faster, faster, faster. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And it wants to like control and so forth. It wants something to grip on. It wants something to know that it's doing. It wants to be on an arc. It wants to be on a journey. It wants to be going somewhere. So none of this is what I am. Imagine consciousness. In one sense, you can imagine it as what you are, but you can imagine consciousness as something so expansive. So expansive. So much larger than that which you've considered yourself to be. As the significance of it falls away, you may notice your nervous system unwinding. You may notice yourself feeling more calm. And you may notice a sense of trust coming online, where really the organism that consciousness identified itself to be doesn't need to be manhandled by the ego, doesn't need to be coddled by the ego. The unfolding of its life doesn't need to be masterminded by the ego. Like the ego, you can see how it aggrandizes itself. The ego will always say something like, my life would just fall apart if it weren't for me, right? Like just imagine saying to yourself, just for fun, like imagine saying, I'm going to totally surrender to life and I'm going to totally trust the flow of life. I'm going to totally trust that I'm on track and I'm going to totally trust that all is well and all is moving towards its highest and best outcome. And I'm going to trust that there's nothing to worry about and that I'm safe and good and everything's good. Right? Of course, the ego mind would want to reject that. And if the ego were to accept that, then the ego would have nothing left to do. And if it has nothing to do, then it doesn't have a use. And if it doesn't have a use, well, then it feels threatened, and rightfully so. The ego needs this sense of purpose. It needs a bone to chew on. It needs an arc. It needs to be going from here to there in order to function. It's like I heard like sharks die if they're not in constant motion. Who knows if it's true, but it has that quality. And yet, if you move into this trust, it's not that the ego dies, it's just that it's no longer the CEO of your company. It's no longer the captain of the ship, which it was never supposed to be anyway. In a manner of speaking, you become the captain of the ship. And the ego says, okay, so what do we do? Nothing? Do we just wither and die? Do we just hope for the best? No, it's not like that either. It's not like that. It's all that happens is we return to the simplicity of what is there to do and do it. So I could ask you right now, if you're watching this, maybe you have a few extra minutes on your hands. So you could ask yourself, what is the wisest thing I could do today? What's the wisest thing I could do this morning? What's something I could do today that if I did it, it would just I'd really view today as a success? Ask yourself that question. You'll get an answer. You'll get an answer. And if you get the answer and do the answer, it will turn today into an incredibly productive day. Into a day that you'll be grateful for, a day that you'll feel great about, a day that you'll look back on and be like, yeah, that was a good day. It's so strange, again, because the reason why I don't really talk about productivity anymore, maybe I reserve the right to return to it, but the reason why is because that's productivity. That's it. It's nothing other than that. It's not writing 1,000,000 pages of something. It's just asking, what's the smartest and wisest thing that I can do today? Don't make it complicated. It's not complicated. If 3 things show up for you and you can't choose, then it means it doesn't matter which one you choose. So just choose one. Go with it. Take action. If you conducted yourself like that every day, your life would take on all sorts of miraculous velocity. You'd create all sorts of success for yourself. That's productivity. And then you can give your ego something to do, and then it will excel at it. It will mastermind it. It'll do great. And then everything will be in its right relationship. So that's what I came here to say. Consider getting on my email newsletter as well. I didn't mention this yet. I have a recording called Seeding New Realities, which I gave to a group member a few months back. And I'm so proud of it and I love it. And there's just such a beautiful, creative, potent energy in this discussion between him and I. And I really want you to hear it. It's an hour long. You can just listen to it while you do something else. And you'll feel it. You'll feel a lot of magic in it. And you'll also get my monthly newsletter, which is super dope as well. Please hit like on the video. And there's one more thought to close with. There's no need to charge ahead with this kind of thing. If you're also on the path of spiritual awakening, the release of suffering, then you may feel, you may feel not that you want to reject what we're discussing here, but you may want to grip onto it and go really hard into it. And that would also be a mistake. The whole irony here is that if you want to find the most expedited path on your journey of spiritual awakening, then you surrender your attempts to control the pace at which it happens. You surrender to it and say, I allow it to unfold at a pace that, according to its own timing, according to divine timing. You could say, I surrender to divine timing. Take it easy with this kind of thing. This is very existential stuff we're talking about.